Question: how did Merry really kill the Witch King? After the last alliance of elves and men fragged Sauron and swiped his ring, the men of Numenor established two kingdoms, Gondor in the south and Arnor in the north. But if Gondor was the Ned Stark of Middle-earth, Arnor was definitely the Boromir. Yep, Arnor had all the potential in the world, but just couldn't quite seem to bring it all together. Eventually, the ruling family fought among themselves, and Arnor was split into several smaller, weaker states. But they were all of them deceived. For as they were fighting each other, an old power had been secretly growing in the icy lands of Angmar to the north. Their leader was called the Witch King, and created a great army of men that attacked the separate states of Arnor, conquering them one by one. For 500 years they fought, and while the Dunedain of Arnor were the superior warriors, no weapon seemed to harm the Witch King. After decades of study, a Dunedain smith was eventually able to forge the Daggers of Westerness, weapons specifically designed to penetrate the enchanted spell that surrounded the Witch King. But Arnor fell before the daggers could ever be used. But there were some that resisted Angmar, an alliance of the men of Gondor, and the elves of Lindon, and even archers from the Shire attacked the forces of Angmar. And as the two armies clashed, Gondorian cavalry charged from the flanks and broke apart the ranks of the enemy. The forces of Angmar fled, but up came the armies of the elf hero Glorfindel to cut off their escape. The enemy was thrown down, and the Witch King fled from Glorfindel, spirited away back to the ancient lands of Mordor. It was there that Glorfindel spoke his infamous prophecy, that the Witch King would not be killed by a man. The threat of Angmar was ended, but yet too late for Arnor. The last remnants of the Dunedain of the North became silent warriors that roamed the northern lands in secret, known only as the Rangers. And the Daggers of Westerness were never used, and over the long centuries they all decayed into dust and memory, just like the country of Arnor. I've been reading books of old,
2,000 years later.
In the films, Frodo and Sam start off their adventure and kind of randomly bump into Merry and Pippin. But in the book, totally different. Okay, in the book, Merry, Pippin, Sam, and Frodo are a four-man team, planning out their adventure right from the start together at Bag End. And in between their chase of the Buckleberry Ferry and their stay at the Prancing Pony, they have several amazing Hobbit adventures that never made it into the films. And all this time being chased by the Witch King. Yep, 1,000 years later and this guy is still going strong. He knew all about Glorfindel's prophecy, of course. But unfortunately, the Witch King made a critical grammatical error. Instead of would not be killed by a man, he thought it meant he could not be killed by a man. And so old Spooky Face here just started walking around the place like nothing could hurt him. Jeez. Anyway, just before reaching Bree, our four hobbits get lost in a super foggy forest and stumble onto a barrow mound. This was an ancient tomb of an old king of Arnor, buried 1,000 years before in a great mound. A ring of rocks like Stonehenge lay above it, and deep below in the tomb lay the king with all his treasures. But this treasure was haunted by a ghostly barrow-wight that descended upon the hobbits when they entered the Stonehenge. Frodo awoke to find himself and the others laying on a cold stone floor deep in the tomb, the darkness pierced only by the occasional glint of gold and silver. You see, in the timeless tomb of the barrow-wight, time stands still, gold doesn't tarnish, and treasure does not decay or corrode. Everything is as it was when the spirit first haunted the barrow. To his horror, Frodo saw a great arm crawling across the floor, preparing to execute the hobbits with a jeweled sword. Luckily, he was allowed to phone a friend, and the hobbits were saved by Tom Bombadil. Tommy B, an epic S-tier legend that's been leaping over heels with his swaggy hat since before creation, who promptly sings the barrow-wight to death. Well, the four hobbits escape the barrow mound, but in the treasure they find something curious. 4 small daggers. 4 daggers that work well as swords for a small hobbit. 4 daggers of great value that the king of Arnor had buried with him. 4 daggers that should have turned to dust long ago but were preserved in the timeless halls of the barrow. 4 daggers of Westerness. You see, Merry carried that blade through many adventures all the way to Rivendell, and then through Moria and Lothlorien and halfway across the world to Amon Hen. And when he was captured by the Uruk-hai, Aragorn picked up the blade and carried it all the way to Isengard, where he gave it back to Merry, who wore it on his side as he rode with the Knights of Rohan all the way to Minas Tirith, where he and the Dagger of Westerness charged the flanks of the armies of Mordor. And there, on the Pelennor fields, When Eowyn's horse bolted and Merry was thrown to the ground, he found himself just behind the Lord of the Nazgul, carrying maybe the only blade on the planet that could actually kill the Witch King. You see, in the end, Glorfindel was right. For Merry, not a man Brandybuck stabbed the Witch King just behind the knee, breaking the spell and immobilizing the ringwraith, followed by Eowyn, not a man Shield Maiden, one-shotting him right in the face with a big old sword. Epic. I mean, I'm no grammarian. Would not, could not, I don't know. But I do know should not, as in should not underestimate the reach of a hobbit. Take that, Eomer.